Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to today's stream from a for once clear Florida night. You're looking at a live view of the North America Nebula NGC 7000 in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. Now, this is really awesome because if you guys have been tuning in for the streams, the last couple of streams has just been weather delay after weather delay after weather delay. So it's nice to be able to finally have a clear start and get started at roughly the time I was hoping to do. So this is fantastic. Thank you for tuning in again. My name is Kyle. I'm with High Point Scientific, and I'm here to answer any of your questions about astronomy, the nighttime sky, and to share with you these beautiful views through my camera lens. So a little bit of insight about what I'm using tonight, because I know a bunch of people are going to ask, so I'll be addressing it multiple times throughout the stream, but I am using a Samyang 135mm f2 lens in combination with a ZWO 183 MC Pro camera to be able to bring you these views. Now, that's not all I'm using. I'm also using what's called an Optolong L enhance filter that basically allows me to cut to the light pollution and sort of get these more narrowband sort of data that we're getting here. So this is a beautiful view of the North America Nebula that we can see. So one thing I like to do when I do these live streams is I love to see where everybody's viewing from. So if you could let me know in the comments where you're viewing from. I see we have Scott checking in from Des Moines, Iowa. Hello, Scott. I hope you have clear skies there. And again, feel free to ask any questions or comments you have about astronomy or the nighttime sky or about the universe in general. Now, the summer sky is filled with absolutely beautiful objects that we can see in the nighttime sky. The North American Nebula is by far one of my favorites, but we'll also be looking at the Elephant Trunk Nebula, the Eagle Nebula, the Omega Nebula, both in the same field of view, as a matter of fact. Let me think. And a bunch of other different targets we'll be seeing in the sky this evening. So it's going to be a really exciting time tonight. And do me a solid, if you're tuning in, you're watching this live stream with us, please feel free to share this with your friends and your family. Get the word out. Get people excited about astronomy in the nighttime sky, because it's what we love to do here. We have Robert checking in from Rochester, New York. Ron checking in from Coleman, Alabama. Fred checking in from Southern Illinois. Karen checking in from Lexington, Kentucky. We have people from northern New Mexico. Timothy from Cincinnati. Good deal, good deal. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope we have a great show in store for you tonight. We have Dan checking in from Japan. Thank you for the compliment on the view. Heather checking in from Ohio. Marvin is asking, where in Florida are you taking these photos? I'm actually taking these photos from Tampa, Florida. Gary wants to know, is this a live view of the nebula? This is a live view. This is a live view through my 135mm f2 camera lens. I am taking 5-minute exposures at a gain of 200 to be able to bring you these views. We have Logan checking in from New Zealand. Always great to see such a large, diverse, international audience. Jason wants to know what mount I am using. I am using the Celestron AVX mount. Now you might be thinking, 5-minute exposures on the AVX mount. What is this guy doing? And as a matter of fact, it turns out the image scale is so small here with this setup that I'm able to get away with 5-minute exposures even with a mount like the AVX. So it's fantastic. It's a fantastic setup, and I would really recommend using it. So just the Celestron AVX. I also have a Celestron CGX that I use for planets and stuff like that, but no need for it tonight. So you might be looking at this, and without knowing, you might think that this is what you would see through an eyepiece. Unfortunately, that is not the case. This is the result of an exposure. So what I've done is I've done, like I said, a 5-minute exposure, and over time, the photons hit the sensor to increase what's called the signal-to-noise ratio, so we get more signal per exposure, and as a result of that, we see a brighter view of the nebula. Scott says the AVX is a great entry mount. I absolutely agree. It's when you try things like I do and put a 6-inch f5 Newtonian and expect it to take 5-minute exposures is when you might run into problems with the mount. But, you know, it is a fantastic entry-level mount. We have Dennis checking in from Colorado. Thank you again so much for tuning in, everybody. Let's hope my Wi-Fi stays stable outside. I keep having losing connecting to TeamViewer, so fingers crossed that doesn't happen again. Timothy wanted to know how far away is this nebula, and that's a good question. This nebula is about 2,200 light years away from the Earth. Now, you may ask yourself, how do astronomers know so precisely the distance of something so far away? After all, a light year is an incredible distance. Light travels fast, but it doesn't travel infinitely fast. It only moves at 3 times 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. So it moves incredibly fast, so fast that it would take it takes, in 1 second, it'll go around the Earth 7 times, and it takes 1 second to go from the Earth to the Moon, getting a little tongue-tied there. And yeah, so light travels incredibly fast, but we know how far away these things are through things like parallax. Parallax is when we measure the position of a star in the nighttime sky from one side of the sun, and then 6 months later we measure it again, and we measure that little change in the angle, and we're able to compute a distance. So that's called stellar parallax, and that's one way astronomers measure distance in the nighttime sky. Scott says he's also a big fan of the L-Enhance in my Bortle 7 sky. It does a great job on the light pollution and really makes the red pop. I absolutely agree. The L-Enhance is a fantastic filter. It's really saved me on so many nights. So we're going to hang on this nebula for a few more moments here just to be able to really enjoy it. After this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a little bit of my setup tonight. Many of you experienced astrophotographers might be familiar with this piece of software that I'm using, but it's called NINA, Nighttime Imaging in Astronomy. It is a fantastic piece of freeware, open source software that really has changed my astrophotography experience, and I cannot recommend it enough. I'm also using it in conjunction with Celestron's PWI software with my AVX mount, and I have it attached to a little hand controller. And what that does, it enables me to be able to control my telescope from the comfort of my chair indoors. Harry saying they're having they're having nice weather all week. Very, very awesome. That's in Southwest Michigan. Alright, so I feel like we've looked at this nebula for quite a while now, about maybe 5-10 minutes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to end that exposure really quick, and then I'm going to change the view here from a cropped in view to the software that I'm using. And again, that is called NINA, Nighttime Imaging and Astronomy. So let's do a quick overview of how I'm using this and what I'm doing to control everything. If we go to the Equipment tab, we will see we have my guide scope set up. You know, guiding is okay, not terrible tonight. We go to the camera, we can see we have everything to control the camera here. We are chilled about negative 10 degrees Celsius, so pretty cool. We're using about 61% of the cooler power. Normally I don't like to go above 50, but tonight the weather is in the 80s, so it's kind of impossible to avoid. We don't have any filters attached, any focusers. The telescope is again controlled through a software called CPWI, which I have right here for you guys to take a look at. And you can see this is the software, sort of the planetarium software I'm using to connect everything. So that's that. And we have our Sky Atlas here. So right now you can see we're pointed on the North America Nebula. The framing wizard, which is something I absolutely love, it enables me to be able to load an image and really see how things are framed in the field of view. It's a fantastic piece of software. Then we have the flat wizard. That's for taking things like flats, which would take out the sort of dirt and dust that you might get on your sensor. A flat frame will take that out for you. Then we have a sequence. I'm not running a sequence tonight because I'm just doing looped exposures. And then we have, of course, our imaging. So we're going to go back to the Sky Atlas here, and then we're going to go to the Elephant Trunk Nebula. So let me actually mute my mic here. I will look up the Okay, unmuted. Just didn't want to hear you guys listen to me clattering away at my keyboard while I look up the number for that really quick. So we're going to be going to IC, if it'll let me. We're going to IC 1396. Oh, UC, whoops. Embarrassing. Can't see. Let's see if we can find it. Usually it pops up. Don't know what the story is here tonight. Interesting. Huh. No luck there. Interesting. So let's go back to imaging really quick while I sort that one out really fast. I'm sure somebody in the comments are like, what are you doing? You're not doing this right. I don't know what the story is there, but the IC number usually pops up for me there. So that is interesting. I'll get back to your questions in just a moment here. Alright, so I'm not entirely sure why that didn't pop up in my sky catalog here, but what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Eagle Nebula really quick. So we're going to slew to that. So I've just sent a command to the telescope mount to slew on over to M16, the Eagle Nebula. And we'll see if that should be centered. We should have both the Eagle and the Omega Nebula in the field of view. Alright, so I've slewed the telescope on over, and what I'm going to do is take a 5-minute exposure of the Eagle Nebula, and hopefully the Omega Nebula should also be in the field of view just to the south a little bit. Oh, is that the problem? I typed 1386. Oh boy. You know, take my astronomy degree. Just take it away from me now, because that's embarrassing. That's what I get for relying off memory there. I see 1396. We'll look at that next. So we got Bob asking, Bob wants to know, are you guiding on axis or off axis? And I'm guiding on axis. I'm using a 120 millimeter camera or guide scope to be able to guide for you. Scott says the Eagle is doable from Iowa, but a lot lower for me. Would like to be at your latitude. And it is absolutely fantastic to be at low latitude because you can see so many beautiful objects in the Milky Way galaxy. What we're going to do is we're going to crop it in a little bit more. And I'll take some more of your questions while we wait for that next exposure to come in. It'll be funny. Watch me not be pointed anywhere near it. Don't you just hate that when you just set up and then everything's looking good, and then you point to your target, and then boom, you know, right ascension's off like 20 degrees or something ridiculous like that. I hope that's not the case, but we'll find out here in a few minutes. Granted, it'll be pretty small in the field of view. The Eagle Nebula is actually not that big of an object in the nighttime sky, so because I'm using a 135 millimeter, I might be able to frame up both the Omega and the Eagle Nebula. We'll also be looking at the Lagoon Nebula, so that's probably where we stop next. Tim wants to know, would it be better to watch this on YouTube or Facebook? Entirely your preference. I'm streaming on both, and both are equally as good quality in my opinion. For those who aren't aware, on a Facebook page, we do have a YouTube channel. Check us out on High Point Scientific. Give us a subscribe. And yeah, no preference. I try to answer questions on both Facebook and YouTube. Stevens is checking in from Guatemala. He wants to know, does the light pollution filters enhance the deep sky views? For visual astronomy, and not particularly, no, because it's a narrowband filter, it'll block a lot of the light, so it'll actually make things very, very faint. It just allows a specific wavelength of light to come through. Now, that's great for a camera because a camera can compensate for a dimmer image by increasing the exposure time, but for visual astronomy, the L-enhance would be a poor option for visual astronomy. Ernie wants to know, have you done the Lagoon and Trifid yet? No, that's next up. So again, if you're just tuning in, you're looking at what was a live view of the North America Nebula. My name is Kyle, and I'm your host tonight. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're just waiting for another exposure to come in of the Eagle Nebula. And I've been doing astrophotography about 7 years, and I just want to tell you, astrophotography is the most rewarding hobby. It really inspires me to push deeper into this hobby, to learn more about the nighttime sky, to really learn more about the universe in which we live in. You know, I'm one of those guys who just not exclusively does astrophotography, but I'd say 90% of my astronomy is astrophotography. I don't do much observing through an eyepiece because, in my opinion, just taking photos of the nighttime sky really brings the experience alive more than just an eyepiece. Now, that being said, I won't deny that a few nights ago I was out with my 8-inch Dobsonian and I was looking at Jupiter and Saturn, and it was absolutely beautiful. I love being able to hunt the moons in Saturn. So let's hope the framing is good here. Yeah, guiding is yucky, but you can see the North America Nebula, or excuse me, the Eagle Nebula up top here. Let me just zoom in a little bit, move up. What's going on with guiding? I'm close. Let's fix that really quick. Okay, so the problem with guiding was that I was not guiding. So that will do it. So you're looking at a very trailed view of the Eagle Nebula. So we'll just wait another few minutes for that view to sort of correct itself. Always remember to enable your guiding after slewing. Always remember. We have Joe checking in from Chicago, saying it's remarkably clear there. For those who might be new to astrophotography, if your stars look like this, this means that there is a periodic error in your mount. That's why they sell guide scopes and guide cameras and stuff like that, to be able to correct for these errors in your mount, because your mount tracks pretty good, even well polar aligned, but it doesn't track perfectly. Because of that, I forgot to enable my guiding here, and the view is a little distorted because of that periodic error that I mentioned. So I've re-enabled guiding, so hopefully that should correct itself here in a few minutes. Ernie wants to know, are you live stacking? So for those who aren't aware, live stacking is a process where you basically do exactly what it says. You stack images live to be able to increase that signal to noise ratio even further. And to answer your question, no, I am not live stacking. These are live views. Single frames is what I'm trying to say. Gary says star trails. Lots of star trails. Didn't you know you were tuning in to a Star Trails live stream? That should hopefully fix itself here. Just got to make sure that guiding's enabled. Vince says, I haven't done astrophotography, but I'm curious how guiding works. If your mount is tracking, what does guiding buy you? Novice here. Well, Vince, we just mentioned it a little bit, but I'll go a little bit more in depth so that you might understand. Your telescope mount tracks the nighttime sky. It does a really good job at it, but it doesn't do it perfectly. Because of this, there are little errors in the tracking. Now, this doesn't really appear for visual astronomy, but for astrophotography, it can be quite a headache to deal with, especially when you're taking 5-10 minute exposures. So what a guiding does is basically you connect a smaller telescope, what's called a guide scope, and a guide camera, so a secondary camera, a secondary scope, and the guide camera will detect those errors in your tracking, and it will communicate to the mount. I'm using what's called pulse guiding here to be able to correct those errors and distortions that you see here. So hopefully now that I've enabled guiding, that should be taken care of. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, Vince, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to let me know, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Gary wants to know, with your AVX or any mount that you have, do you use a polar alignment routine or camera? As a matter of fact, yes, I do. I use SharpCap Pro's polar alignment software to be able to address errors in tracking by getting a precise polar alignment. So, SharpCap. Fantastic piece of software. SharpCap Pro is about $15 a year, and really worth the money because it will use your telescope and it will polar align via plate solving, as I understand it. Scott says it's pretty clear in Atlanta since Tropical Storm Ida came through. Well, Scott, I hope you didn't have any flooding or anything like that from Ida. That was a nasty one. Boom, beautiful. Sorry. Not beautiful, the tropical storm, but beautiful. This new image just came through. And man, this is what I'm talking about. Now that I've corrected for that guiding, we can see a beautiful view of the North America. I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to be wrong every time I say it. The Eagle Nebula. And you can see, almost see the pillars of creation there. What an extraordinarily beautiful view. Gary wants to know, are you using PhD2 or is there a guiding routine in Nina? By the way, I ran into some financial difficulty, and I think half your sentence got cut off there. But I'm sorry to hear that you lost everything like that, and that's a real bummer to hear. Okay, the rest of your comment came in. Well, that's a bummer, Gary. You know, I can't imagine how difficult that would be to able to lose all of your astrophotography equipment. And, you know, I'm glad that you're able to at least enjoy the views through this stream. But to answer your question, I'm using PhD2. Nina is connected through PhD2, and I'm able to communicate several pieces of software using Nina. So it's a fantastic piece of software. So I'll just let another exposure finish up here, and then what I'm going to do is move on to our next target of the evening, and that will probably be the Lagoon and Trifid Nebula. We're going to go back to the Elephant Truck Nebula at some point, I promise you. You know, it's just amazing. Living here in Florida, basically every night this summer has been cloudy, and it's just been insanely difficult. We've had hurricanes go by, and we've had rainstorms every night, and it's just so great to be able to share these views of the nighttime sky finally. It really, not to be corny, but it really means a lot to me to see you guys tuning in and to talk to you guys about astronomy in the nighttime sky. So it's fantastic to interact with each and every one of you and to be able to share these views of the universe. Peter points out another good way to do pole alignment is to use the ASI Air Pro, and I absolutely agree. I don't have a lot of familiarity with that one myself, but I know it's a good option if you invest in it. I just prefer to use a laptop because it's just it's pretty straightforward. You know, don't like to have to learn new tricks if I don't have to. Ernie says they tuned in late. What scope and camera? Using the 135mm f2 and ZWO 183 MC Pro camera, combined with the L-enhanced filter on the Celestron AVX mount. Stevens asks, can I mount a 200 millimeter, 1200 millimeter reflector on that AVX? I would not recommend it. You can try. You might not get great astrophotography results, but you definitely can try. I wouldn't recommend it though. Kirby wants to know any experience with the 8-inch Rasa. It's on my to-buy list. It's as a matter of fact, when I buy a new telescope, which will be soon, I will probably purchase that one because it's a. I had a friend own the 11-inch Rasa, and that one was fantastic. It was a heavy piece, so I don't want to go quite that heavy, but the 8-inch Rasa looks like a fantastic telescope. I haven't personally used it, but I really want to use it. So we've been staring at this nebula for a little bit, so what I'm going to do is zoom out. Also note, you can see all this nebulosity below here. If I plate solved it, I can probably tell you what exactly this is, or somewhere in the comments can see, but there's tons of nebula in this part of the Milky Way galaxy that we can see, and it's super cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out here, and we're going to visit the Lagoon Nebula. So I'm going to stop that exposure, going to turn off my guiding. That's what tripped me up last time. Forgot to do that. We're going to go to Framing, Sky Atlas, and type in Messier 8, and please pop up. So we are going to slew over there. We're going to go back to imaging, and then we're going to wait for the telescope to settle. So that will be just a few moments. Fingers crossed it's not behind a tree. That'd be really unfortunate. Just to do that, I'm going to take a shorter exposure just to see how that looks. And then we're going to take a quick 2-minute exposure to check the framing, to make sure it's not behind a tree. I'm inside my house, so I can't really check. And fingers crossed for a good view. Nancy asks, what software am I using? I'm using the Nighttime Imaging and Astronomy NINA platform. Absolutely amazing piece of software. Cannot say enough good things about it. Gary asking, Kyle, 8-inch HD with a Hyperstar or 8-inch Rasa? Good question. You know, I'd almost say the 8-inch HD simply because you can convert it to something for visual astronomy when you're not wanting to do astrophotography, because the 8-inch Rasa is explicitly for astrophotography. If you have the budget for it, I would go with the 8-inch HD. If you had to make me choose, simply because I also, you know, do occasionally like to do visual astronomy. But I've never used either, so that's just my personal opinion. Ernie says Nina is awesome, and I couldn't agree more. Beautiful. There we go. So we're looking at a live view of the Lagoon in Trifid Nebula. The Lagoon Nebula Messier 8 is up on the top, and the Trifid Nebula is on the bottom there, sort of in the bottom middle. And this is a beautiful nebula that we can see in the nighttime sky. You know what I did? I totally forgot to enable guiding. Fix that really fast. This is by far one of the brighter nebulas that we can see in the summer sky in the constellation of Sagittarius the Archer. Sagittarius is the constellation where the core of the Milky Way can actually be seen. And the Lagoon Nebula, again, one of the brighter nebulas in the nighttime sky, visible from almost any location in the summer. Getting kind of low on the horizon here. You can see the L-Enhance does a good job at filtering out some of the light pollution, but doesn't manage to filter out quite all of it, so we definitely got a bit of a gradient going on here. Peter says, I was told that I don't need a guide scope because I have the Hyperstar. Don't agree with that necessarily. You don't need it explicitly for just like 1 or 2 minute exposures, but if you want to do like 5-minute exposures, a guide scope's still recommended. As you can see, I was still getting star trails, and I'm using a 135mm lens, and I forgot to turn on the guiding. But if you're using a Hyperstar and you're not feeling the need of one, then, you know, no need to have the additional expense. But if you're having problems with star trails and using an 8-inch scope like that, then I would definitely recommend getting the guide scope. Stevens is asking, why do you have to activate the guiding every time you take a photo? Can't you just leave it on? There's a setting in Nina, I believe, and forgive my ignorance, but I don't exactly know what it is to be able to do exactly that. But I have just recently set this program up on my computer. This is a brand new laptop that I'm using, so I think it's an option. I just haven't set it up yet. I hope that answers your question. Again, folks, if you have any questions or comments about astronomy or the nighttime sky, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Let us know that you're watching, where you're watching from, and any views. Although I hope if you have a clear night, I hope you're actually out there in the field doing your own astronomy or astrophotography. But, you know, because there's no substitute to actually being out in the field, in my opinion. But if you have a cloudy night and you're tuning in, thanks for tuning in. We have Jay checking in from Arkansas. Good deal. Okay, folks, when this exposure finishes up, I'm going to go ahead and go to my next target, try and think what that will be. The Omega Nebula would be a good one. There's tons of different nebulas out. The summertime sky is beautiful, but just so many cool things that we can see. Unfortunately, with the L-Enhance, Unfortunately, with the L-Enhance, you are very limited to what nebulas you can photograph. You really can only photograph emission nebula. Those are nebulas like the Lagoon Nebula or the Trifid Nebula, Eagle Nebula, sort of those nebulas that are rich in hydrogen alpha. But it's not so great at broadband, so it's not great at galaxies, and it's not great at broadband targets like the Iris Nebula, the Pleiades, and things like that. So we're fairly limited to emission nebulas tonight. That being said, it is great. It is truly great at emission nebula. It is such a fantastic filter, and I cannot recommend it enough. Veil. Yes, great idea, Ernie. We're going to check out the Veil. That's the Veil complex. I like that so much that I'm going to can Omega and go to Veil, because I've never actually seen that before with this lens. So let's hope we can see something. Alright, so we're going to stop exposures there. I'm going to zoom out, and we're going to go check out the Veil. And we're going to slew it, turn off our guiding, and see what we can see. So right now the telescope is slewing. It has to slew a pretty significant distance, about 90 degrees, because this was quite low on the horizon, and the Veil is almost straight up from my position. So the telescope's going to settle out. Ernie says not sure how much the sub will pull out. It's a good point. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure guiding's enabled. Let's refresh. Refresh, dang it. Select stars. Oh, there it is. I was wondering why the image wasn't updating. And that was annoying. So we're going to up the exposure to 5 minutes and see what we can pull out. I'm very excited about this one. I've never actually imaged the Veil complex with this lens, so no idea what to expect. Might actually be able to pull out some colors besides blue, or besides red in that one, if I'm not mistaken. We got a question asking have we looked at the Iris Nebula yet. Probably not going to look at the Iris Nebula because, again, that is an emission nebula. Or excuse me, reflection nebula. One thing I'm excited about as we get later in the year, as the fall months begin to come upon us, is, well, A, clear skies, but B, the absolute, in my opinion, best object in the nighttime sky to photograph, the Andromeda Galaxy, is starting to make its presence known in the evening skies off to the east. And if you have a telescope, if you even have a camera lens, just DSLR, it is a fantastic beginner target. So really excited about that one, and really excited for the opportunity to be able to image it again. I might do a live stream just dedicated to that, just like imaging Andromeda Galaxy and processing it. I think that'd be really cool. So we'll see what we can see though. So we have about 80 seconds left on that exposure. Once again, we've slewed on over to the Veil complex in the constellation of Cygnus to be able to see what we can see. Not expecting too much, but, you know, it's a good try. Timothy says, I would be really interested in that, the Andromeda Galaxy live stream. I would be too. Let's see what we can do. About 40 seconds left on that exposure. Must there be a giant cloud in front of it or something like that. And again, folks, if you have any other suggestions for targets we can look at tonight that are emission nebulas, please feel free to post them in the comments, and I will be more than happy to slew on over to them. About 15 seconds left. And there we go. You're looking at a live view of the Veil complex in the constellation of Cygnus. Let me double check the guiding there. That looked a little squirrely. Multi-star guiding is enabled. I don't know why it suddenly decided to do that, but... oh well. Might just turn guiding off at this point. I'm definitely not having one of my best nights for guiding, but let me crop in here. And again, this is the Veil complex in the constellation of Cygnus. A little bit of glow that you can see off to the corner there, that is what's called amp glow. Now, amp glow is inherent to this camera sensor, and it can easily, it's a bit of a nuisance for astrophotography, but you can easily correct it in post-processing through taking what's called dark frames. Now, dark frames are basically your set to the same exact exposure as your light frames, your imaging frames, but with a lens cap on front. And that will take care of things like amp glow. Some debate on to whether or not a DSLR actually needs a dark frame. Personally, I don't think it really matters, but for a camera like this, dark frames are absolutely essential. Stevens, I would agree, M13 would be great because I don't think it really matters what filter you use for that, but I believe M13 is below the horizon or very close to being below the horizon. I'm pretty confident I don't have a good view of that tonight. Peter wants to know, can one do live streaming using the ASI Air program? And I absolutely don't see why not. Timothy asking if we can see the Horsehead Nebula, and the answer is no, unfortunately we cannot right now because the Horsehead Nebula is below the horizon too. The Horsehead Nebula is in the constellation of Orion, for those who aren't aware, and Orion is below the horizon right now. Dribble says the Crescent Nebula or the Bubble Nebula. Do you want better? How about next we go visit the Sadir region and the Crescent Nebula, both in the same field of view? I think that would be absolutely fantastic. So we got about a few more seconds before another exposure comes in. And then we'll probably go do that. And that will probably be the last target for the night, as it's getting late and I do want to do my own astrophotography here in a little bit before my stuff gets stewed up. So that will probably be our last target for the night. Just a few more seconds left on that exposure. There we go, that looks a little better now that another 5-minute exposure has come in. There's still a little bit of star trails, but not quite as severe as it was earlier. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually stop that exposure, switch over to the full screen view. I'm just going to turn off guiding tonight because I'm just not having it tonight. And we're going to reduce our exposures to probably 2 minutes, up the gain to 150 to compensate. It'll be a little more grainy, but it's a live stream, not astrophotography. And then we're going to go over to Sadir. Let's do a search of that. I don't know why that... Let's do Nebula. And then we're going to slew on over there and see what we can get. Jeff says, thanks for hosting. This is always great. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me to be able to hear your feedback. Joe saying, I enjoyed it and learned some things. Now I'm going to do some of my own. Well, good luck, Joe, and clear skies to you. I hope you can get some good views tonight. So we're going to start that exposure, and let's see what we can see. So we've just got a few more seconds before that exposure comes in, and once again we slewed on over to the Crescent Nebula as well as the, hopefully it's the Sadir region. I believe the two should fit in the field of view quite nicely. My go-to accuracy unfortunately is suffering tonight, but you take what you can get. And again, that will probably be our last target for the night. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Let's crop that in. That might be one of the best views of the night. Didn't quite get the entirety of the Sadir region in, but you can clearly see the Crescent Nebula. And that is in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. Again, Cygnus has so many beautiful nebulas that we can see in the nighttime sky. Stephen's pointing out how many planets there are out there and pondering if life is taking photos at us as well. Interesting question. You know, I think there are, what, 300 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy? And people ask me this all the time. They're like, Kyle, what do you think the odds are of extraterrestrial intelligence? Do you believe there's life in the universe? And to be quite frank, I think there's more life in our own solar system. And if there can be at least two events of genesis in our own solar system, just think about how many life forms there might be out there in the universe. So I think the universe is teeming with life, and I'm willing to bet some of these stars have their own intelligent beings. You know, maybe one of them has a telescope and looking back at us. It's a comforting thought to me. Peter's saying, I can't do any astronomy right now because of all the smoke here in California. That is a bummer to hear, Peter. I hope you can get some clear skies soon. Timothy coming at us with a quote from the movie Contact. It would be an awful waste of space if there's no life out there. Thanks for the tip, Ernie, with Nina. I'll have to remember to enable that. Again, I just downloaded Nina on my new laptop, and I haven't gotten everything totally set up yet, so good reminder. I'm also not running a sequence right now. I'm just running loops. So that's also potentially part of the problem. Well, hey folks, we've been live for about an hour. It's been really great to talk to and get to hear your guys' views on astronomy in the nighttime sky. It's great to be able to share these live views with you. I'd like to sign off now and do a little bit of my own astrophotography because it's been so incredibly rare to get a clear night like this, and I am going to get tired here before too long, so I definitely want to get a few hours of data in. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the live views of the various nebulas that we can see in the nighttime sky. Couldn't quite get to all of them, unfortunately. There are so many out there. Many you can see with an eyepiece, but many more you can see through a camera and a telescope. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, remember,